afternoon came gently, without direction. No urgency hung in its reflection. I'd been breaking my days into purpose and use. Spring let the afternoon unfold loose. I watched shadows lengthen slowly across the floor. Spring doesn't sharpen ours, it softens them more. I felt hunger without rush, rest without guilt. Spring doesn't judge how a day is built. I remember afternoons from years ago. Spring keeps memory in tempo. I sat with nothing pending, nothing due. Spring doesn't measure worth by what you do. I notice how time widened when not chased. Spring doesn't compress moments, it makes space. I felt my thoughts wander without leash. Spring doesn't discipline the mind, it frees. I stopped anticipating evening or night. Spring said now is sufficient light. I breathe without counting, the air stayed. Spring doesn't ration life, it lays. I thought about happiness, not as peak. Spring said happiness lives in the week, in the quiet stretch of minutes unclaimed. Spring lets the afternoon remain. I stayed where I was and time didn't collapse. Spring let the afternoon unfold, perhaps. I didn't capture the moment or name. Spring doesn't need memory to remain. The day moved on without demand or plea. The afternoon spring let unfold carried me. The day didn't change much on the surface. Same light, same room, same purpose. But spring stayed with me in the way time moved. Spring doesn't alter scenery, it soothes. I noticed how moments stop slipping. Spring doesn't grip the day it's sitting. I walk through tasks without urgency. Spring doesn't load hours with currency. I remembered how days used to feel thin. Spring said presence fills from within. I felt a company without company. Spring doesn't require voices to keep. I let the afternoon pass unedited. Spring doesn't curate life, it's credited. I watch the window, hold light steady. Spring doesn't rush evening, it's ready. I stop fearing emptiness and time. Spring said stillness is a sign. I stayed aware without effort. Spring doesn't train attention, it enters. I thought about meaning without question. Spring doesn't answer life, it's a session. I let the day rest inside my chest. Spring stayed with me, and that was best. I reached night without relief or collapse. Spring doesn't exit the day it overlaps. I close my eyes, still accompany the day spring stayed with me, carried me. I'd been walking fast, even when alone, like stillness might catch me if I slowed. Spring didn't tell me to stop or slow. It simply matched my pace until I noticed so. The spring that did not hurry me stayed level, didn't pull me back, didn't rebel. I felt my steps lose their edge. Spring doesn't demand surrender, it suggests. I walk through streets without destination. Spring doesn't need outcomes for validation. I remembered learning to rush my joy. Spring said joy doesn't expire when delayed. I felt the ground more clearly. Spring doesn't speed the body, it steadies. I walk with my thoughts instead of ahead. Spring doesn't separate mind from tread. I noticed how breathing found agreement. Spring doesn't train rhythm, it's alignment. I passed hours without naming them. Spring doesn't label time to claim it. Oh, I stopped worrying about arriving late. Spring doesn't run life on gates. The sun shifted without pressure. Spring doesn't rush light for measure. I slowed enough to feel the walk. Spring doesn't turn movement into talk. I realized haste was a habit,
Not a need.
Spring doesn't break habits, it unseats. I reach nowhere, still complete. Spring doesn't reward arrival, it repeats. I walked into evening without concern. Spring doesn't hurry the day to return. let me go. Ooh,
without a stop.
ooh, let me go. Oh, let me go. Let me go. I grew up thinking belief was the key. Like life would stay closed without certainty. But spring came anyway without my vote. Spring doesn't wait for what you quote. I woke up unsure, still breathing. Spring doesn't test faith, it keeps going. I didn't affirm the morning, didn't claim. Spring doesn't need agreement to remain. I felt warmth arrive without meaning. Spring doesn't explain itself, it's fear. I'd been afraid doubt would break the spell.
Spring doesn't explain itself.
Spring said doubt lives fine here as well. I noticed how the day held me up. Spring doesn't demand trust, it's enough. I stopped trying to feel hopeful on cue. Spring doesn't require optimism, it's true. I carried questions like open hands. Spring doesn't close them, it understands. I thought about grace, not as reward. Spring said grace is unearned by nature. I felt life continue with or without me. Spring doesn't need belief to be. I watch trees bloom without apology. Spring doesn't ask permission from philosophy. I realize certainty isn't the ground. Spring said the ground is around. I stood in the middle of my doubt, still held. Spring didn't require belief, and yet everything grew. I didn't convert, I didn't swear. Spring doesn't want followers, it's air. I live the day unconvinced, still alive. The spring that did not require belief arrived. I used to think recognition had to be earned, like belonging a ride. after being learned. But spring knew my name before I spoke. Didn't need proof, didn't need note. Oh. I walked into the day you introduced. Spring doesn't ask who you are, it knows you. I felt seen without spotlight. Spring doesn't stare at life, it's light. I remember trying to explain myself. Spring said explanation is a shelf. You don't live on it, you pass through. Spring doesn't label existence, it moves you. I stood among moments without defense. Spring doesn't demand context for presence. I let my voice stay quiet, unasserted. Spring doesn't confuse silence with deserted. I felt understood without agreement. Spring doesn't debate the soul, it accompanies it. I move through hours, untranslated. Spring doesn't need language to relate. I noticed how ease didn't fade. Spring doesn't revoke belonging midway. I remembered how often I tried to be clear. Spring said clarity isn't required to be here. I let myself remain unfinished. Spring doesn't wait for completion to witness. I felt named without being called. Spring doesn't shout identity, it holds. I walk through doubt without losing ground. Spring doesn't let confusion unfound. I realize being known isn't exposure. Spring knows gently without closure. I reached the evening, still unnamed. Spring knew my name, and nothing changed. I lay down knowing before speech, before thought, before reach. Spring knew my name before I spoke, and kept it safe and never broke. I used to think recognition had to be earned, like belonging arrived after being learned. But spring knew my name before I spoke. Didn't need proof, didn't need note. I walked into the day unintroduced. Spring doesn't ask who you are, knows you. I felt seen without spotlight. Spring doesn't stare at life. It's light. I remember trying to explain myself. Spring said explanation is a shelf. You don't live on it, you pass through. Spring doesn't label existence, it moves you. I stood among moments without defense. Spring doesn't demand context for presence. I let my voice stay quiet, unasserted. Spring doesn't confuse silence with deserted. I felt understood without agreement. Spring doesn't debate the soul, it Japanese it. I move through hours untranslated. Spring doesn't need language to relate. I noticed how ease didn't fade. Spring doesn't revoke belonging midway. I remembered how often I tried to be clear. Spring said clarity isn't required to be here. I let myself remain unfinished. Spring doesn't wait for completion to witness. I felt named without being called. Spring doesn't shout identity, it holds. I walk through doubt without losing ground. Spring doesn't let confusion unfound. I realize being known is an exposure. Spring knows gently without closure. I reached evening, still unnamed. Spring knew my name and nothing changed. I lay down knowing before speech, before thought, before reach. Spring knew my name. Spring knew my name before I spoke and kept it safe and never broke. Had been closing every morning before it could speak, like light needed permission to touch me. I woke up with the door half open, didn't remember why. Spring doesn't argue habits, it walks by. The air came in unannounced, soft and sure. Spring left the door open for me and didn't ask for more. I'd been guarding my hours like they could run. Spring said time doesn't escape, it comes. I felt warmth move across my shoulders, then leave. Spring doesn't cling to comfort, it believes. I noticed how the room changed without rearranging. Spring doesn't fix environments, it's changing. I stood there letting moments pass without grip. Spring doesn't rush experience, it slips. Without instruction, spring doesn't follow plans, it functions. I walk through the house slower, still aware. Spring doesn't steal momentum, it shares. I realized openness isn't weakness or lack. Spring leaves the door open and trusts you back. I didn't seal the future or the past. Spring doesn't trap time, it lasts. I moved into the day unprepared. Spring left the door open for me, and I spend most of my life trying to get somewhere, like standing still. Man, I didn't care. The morning didn't point ahead, didn't draw a line. Spring let me walk without arriving on time. I stepped outside with nothing finished, nothing sure. Spring doesn't reward completion, it endures. I felt the sidewalk under me, solid and plain. Spring doesn't promise wonder, it maintains. I walk past plans I once defended, hard and loud. Spring doesn't argue direction, it allows. I notice how my feet found rhythm on their own. Spring doesn't teach movement, it's known. I'd been afraid of wandering, like it and nothing ended. Spring doesn't punish pause, it extends it. I remembered how often I rushed joy. Spring said joy doesn't need speed to deploy. I felt myself loosen into motion without demand. Spring let me walk without arriving as planned. I was afraid. I didn't get answers, didn't resolve. Spring doesn't close chapters, it evolves. I walked until the day met me back. Spring doesn't circle purpose, it tracks. I felt myself closer in turn motion without demand. Spring let me walk without arriving, and I was free. I was free. I used to think blooming was an obligation, like life expected color on demand. Morning arrived the same, whether I shined or not. Spring never asked me to bloom, it held the ground. I noticed how the air didn't lean. Spring doesn't pressure becoming, it's green. I stood in myself unopened. Spring doesn't force the body, it knows when. I remembered how often I rush growth. Spring said unfolding is both. I felt permission in not performing. Spring doesn't applause change, it's forming. I walk through the hours without display. Spring doesn't measure arrival by delay. I've been afraid of staying quiet too long. Spring said roots don't sing, they're strong. I know there's peace in not blooming yet. Spring doesn't punish patience, it lets. I thought about people I tried to impress. Spring doesn't seek witnesses for progress. I felt my chest widen without gold. Spring doesn't need flowers to be whole. I stopped evaluating myself by view. Spring never asked me to bloom, it grew me true. I stayed where I was, and time agreed. Spring doesn't rush becoming, it seeds.
I used to think seasons passed like guests, arriving loud, leaving mess. But spring stayed in the room long after daylight shifted. Spring never left the room, it simply softened. I felt it in the air when nothing changed. Same walls, same chair, still rearranged. Spring doesn't exit its spaces it inhabits, leaves warmth in corners and quiet habits. I sat with no intention, no plan to move. Spring stayed with me in how the room breathed too. I noticed how the clock sounded less sharp. Spring dulls the edges of hours that cut hard. I remembered sitting alone, used to feel empty. Spring said alone is not absence, it's entry. I let the room hold me without interaction. Spring doesn't require response or reaction. I stayed seated as thought slowed. Spring never leaves, it settles low. I felt company without arrival. Spring doesn't enter with noise, it's survival. I listen to the hum of quiet walls. Spring lives in the space between calls. I didn't reach for memory or dream. Spring doesn't need time travel to be seen. I stayed until evening became night. Spring stayed in the room without light. I felt rest, not sleep, just ease. Spring doesn't push the body, it frees. I breathed and the room breathed back. Spring never left the room, it stayed intact. I realize seasons aren't always outside. Spring stays where presence isn't denied. I lay down knowing nothing had gone. Spring never left the room, it lived on. I had been guarding my heart like it was late, like feeling too deeply would slow my pace. But spring never rushed my heart, not once. It let every feeling finish its sentence. I woke with emotion still settling. Spring doesn't shake the soul, it lets it rain. I felt joy arrive, then rest, then change. Spring doesn't demand emotion, remain the same. I stayed with the sadness longer than planned. Spring doesn't hurry healing by command. I notice how tears didn't weaken. Spring doesn't judge relief,
said moving on
is moving wrong. Sometimes you stay until feeling is done. Spring doesn't cut the heart mid-song. I walk through the day feeling fully. Spring doesn't ration death, it gives it wholly. I felt love without urgency or fear. Spring doesn't threaten loss when love is near. I let memories surface then pass. Spring doesn't trap emotion in the past. I breathe through sensation without naming. Spring doesn't require understanding to keep meaning. I felt my chest soften then open. Spring doesn't pry the heart, it coaxes. I stayed with warm as it cooled naturally. Spring doesn't preserve feelings artificially. I walked into evening, emotion intact. Spring never rushed my heart, and nothing cracked. I lay down knowing the heart has pace.
Spring doesn't speed love,
It gives it space. I slept with feeling still alive,
spring never rushed my heart.
and I survived. I had been guarding my heart like it was late, like feeling too deeply would slow my pace. But spring never rushed my heart, not once. It let every feeling finish its sentence. I woke with emotion still settling. Spring doesn't shake the soul, it lets it ring. I felt joy arrive, then rest, then change. Spring doesn't demand emotion, remain the same. I stayed with the sadness longer than planned. Spring doesn't hurry healing by command. I noticed how tears didn't weaken. Oh, oh, oh. Spring doesn't judge release as leaking. Remembered hiding fear to move on. Spring said moving on is moving wrong. Sometimes you stay until feeling is done. Spring doesn't cut the heart mid-song. I walk through the day feeling fully. Spring doesn't ration depth, it gives it wholly. Oh, I felt love without urgency or fear. Spring doesn't threaten loss when love is near. Oh, I let memories surface, then pass. Spring doesn't trap emotion in the past. I breathe through sensation without naming. Spring doesn't require understanding to keep meaning. I felt my chest soften, then open. Spring doesn't pry the heart, it coaxes. I stayed with warmth as it cooled naturally. Yeah. Spring doesn't preserve feelings artificially. I walked into evening, emotion intact. Spring never rushed my heart, and nothing cracked. I lay down knowing the heart has pace. Spring doesn't speed love, it gives it space. Yeah, I slept with feeling still alive. Spring never rushed my heart, and I survived. I'd been moving through days like balance was fragile, like one wrong step would tilt me. Spring never took its hand off me, even when I didn't feel it. Didn't tighten its grip, didn't signal. I walked into morning, uncertain. Spring doesn't announce support, it's current. I felt steadiness without instruction. Spring doesn't correct posture, it's function. I made mistakes without punishment. Spring doesn't withdraw care for movement. I remembered how often I feared falling. Spring said falling isn't failure, it's calling. I felt held, not lifted. Spring doesn't remove weight, it distributes. I stood through moments of doubt and sway. Spring doesn't abandon balance midway. I walk through conversations unprotected. Spring doesn't shield the heart, it connects it. I felt tired, without collapsing. Spring doesn't release support for resting. I leaned into silence, didn't break. Spring doesn't require strength to stay. I moved through afternoon and into dim light. Spring never took its hand off me all night. I stopped proving I was stable or strong. Spring doesn't test endurance, it belongs. I realize support doesn't always speak. Spring stays closest when quiet is deep. I walk slower, still secure. Spring doesn't loosen care when unsure. I reach the end of the day, still held. Spring never took its hand off me, that's what it felt. I lay down knowing,
Even in sleep, spring never took its hand off me.
it keeps.
I lay down knowing, even in sleep, spring never took its hand off me. I lay down knowing, even in sleep, spring never took its hand off me. I lay down knowing.
I didn't notice at first. There was no signal, no shift dramatic enough to announce. Spring sat down beside me like it had always been there. Didn't ask for attention, didn't stare. I kept looking forward at what needed fixing. Spring doesn't interrupt habits, it listens. I felt the warmth arrive, not on my skin, but somewhere quieter within. Spring sat down beside me without leaning, didn't try to guide my thoughts or meaning. I stayed focused on nothing in particular. Spring doesn't demand clarity to be familiar. I remembered how often I mistook pressure for care. Spring doesn't tighten presence, it shares. I sat with a feeling that had no edges. Spring doesn't shape emotions, it lets them. I stopped preparing responses to imagined voices. Spring doesn't compete with noise, it dissolves it. Time slowed, not because it stopped, but because I stopped chasing its cost. Spring sat down beside me through the afternoon, didn't move when light shifted in the room. I noticed how comfort didn't excite. Spring doesn't thrill the body, it's right. I breathed and didn't correct the rhythm. Spring doesn't optimize life, it lives it. I sat through moments that once felt too long. Spring said length is not burden, it's song. I realized companionship doesn't always speak. Spring sits beside you all week. I stood up eventually, nothing changed. Spring didn't follow, it remained. I walked away knowing what I'd felt was true. Spring sat down beside me, and it still knew. was the same as stopping, like movement only counted if it left. Morning showed me otherwise through quiet light. Spring taught me how to stay without regret. I stayed with the sound of my own breathing. Didn't rush it forward, didn't pull it back. Spring doesn't confuse motion with escape. It lets the moment sit intact. I stayed with the thought before improving it. Let it exist uncorrected. Spring said presence is not unfinished, it's complete when respected. I stayed with a feeling that wasn't resolved. Didn't name it, didn't solve. Spring doesn't hurry clarity, it trusts that truth will rise if left with us. I stayed in the room as light shifted slowly. Watch walls change color without moving. Spring said staying is also a journey, just one that goes inward and keeps going. I stayed with memory without reopening wounds. Spring doesn't revisit pain to prove. I stayed in silence longer than comfort found. It didn't collapse me, it held. Spring doesn't abandon you in quiet. It teaches you how to listen. I stayed with the day as it loosened its grip. Hours passed without slipping. Spring said time doesn't leave you,
You leave it
when you stop staying inside it.
inside it.
I stayed without ambition for the afternoon. Let purpose rest, let effort loosen. Spring doesn't demand productivity from being, it values awareness over meaning. I stayed as evening arrived without preparing. Let shadows come without fearing. Spring said endings don't require defense. They arrive best when met with presence. I stayed with myself through the dark, didn't distract, didn't depart. Spring taught me how to stay, not frozen, but open and warm. I slept knowing staying is not delay. Spring taught me how to stay in the world, stay too.
The day used to rush me before I was ready. Like light had agenda I couldn't meet. But spring taught the day to wait right where it was. Didn't dim the sun, just softened its cause. I woke without urgency, still awake. Spring doesn't confuse alert with a wait. I stayed in bed long enough to feel thought arrive. Spring doesn't push the mind to survive. The morning sat quietly on the wall. Spring doesn't knock on ours, it calls. I remember learning to chase time. Spring said time isn't fleeing, it's kind. I move slowly, not resisting. Spring doesn't reward speed with meaning. I watch light slide across the room, unclaimed. Spring doesn't sign moments with names. I felt the hour widen without thinning. Spring doesn't empty minutes by letting. I stood in the kitchen holding a cup. Spring doesn't lift the day, it holds it up. I let silence sit between actions. Spring doesn't break stillness with traction. I noticed how waiting stopped being heavy. Spring doesn't wait patience, unsteady. The afternoon arrived without surprise. Spring doesn't stage time, it arrives. I stayed with hunger, then fullness, then calm. Spring doesn't separate states. In a mall I remember rushing evenings out of fear. Spring said night is not lost, it's near. I watch shadows grow without concern. Spring doesn't warn the dark to return. I stayed with the day as it slowed itself. Spring taught the day to wait for my breath. I didn't feel late or early. Spring doesn't schedule presents, it's worthy. I reach night without collapse. Spring taught the day to wait, and it lasted. I used to think seasons passed over me like weather touching skin, then leaving. But spring walked through me slowly, step by step, not entering, not exiting, just kept. I felt it in my posture before thought. Spring doesn't arrive loud, it's taught. I notice how my spine found ease. Spring doesn't correct the body, it agrees. I walk the rooms feeling rearranged. Spring doesn't move furniture, it changes space. I felt time pass through my muscles. Spring doesn't rush movement, it trusts it. I remembered carrying tension for years. Spring doesn't confront fear, it nears. I stood in silence long enough to feel. Spring doesn't explain reality, it reveals. I walked outside, then inside again. Spring doesn't explain reality, it reveals. I walked outside, then inside again. Spring doesn't explain reality where you've been. I felt presence deepen without effort. Spring doesn't train awareness, it enters. I move through afternoon without edges. Spring doesn't cut the day into measures. I let thought drift, then settle. Spring doesn't
doesn't command the mind, it levels. I notice how calm didn't feel empty. Spring doesn't confuse quiet with lacking. I walk through evening still open. Spring doesn't close the body, it opens. I lay down feeling inhabited. Spring walked through me slowly and stayed embedded. I realize seasons don't always pass. Spring walks through you slowly and lasts. I slept knowing nothing had lived. Spring walked through me slowly